COVID cases rise again as doubts increase about the lifting of restrictions in England. Today saw the highest number of infections since February as the Prime Minister says they need to know more about the impact of the vaccine.
What we need to assess is the extent to which the vaccine rollout, which has been phenomenal, has built up enough protection.
Also tonight, a jury has told a teenager on trial for the murder of two sisters in a London park believed he'd made a pact with the devil. Did Ryanair and British Airways breach consumer law by not refunding passengers stopped from boarding flights during lockdown? We hear from the family of British twins who survived a crocodile attack in Mexico. And can Wales recapture the magic of 2016 as they prepare for the Euros in Azerbaijan?
This is the ITV Evening News with Lucrezia Millarini.
Good evening. There's more evidence tonight that the drip of doubt is growing stronger over the plan to release England from lockdown on June the 21st. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his senior ministers continue to insist the decision won't be announced until next Monday. He says a key factor will be the impact of the vaccine rollout. COVID infections are still rising steeply, with more than 7,500 new cases today, the highest since February. But a senior NHS figure claimed today the vaccine is breaking the link between COVID cases and deaths. The latest from our political correspondent, Carl Dinnan.
The Prime Minister normally exudes enough sunny optimism to power his own solar panel, but when it comes to lifting restrictions in England in just over 2 weeks' time, he's cautious.
What we need to assess is the extent to which the vaccine rollout, which has been phenomenal, has built up enough protection in the population in order for us to go ahead to the next stage.
Today's figures show 7,500 new infections, a 66% week-on-week increase. There are just over 1,000 people in hospital with COVID, which is only an 11% increase on a week ago. 6 coronavirus deaths have been reported and the weekly increase there is 43%, but at a low level. NHS trusts think the vaccines are therefore breaking the link between infection and hospitalisation.
It's very, very striking that probably 2/3 to 3/4 of people who are coming into hospital are people who haven't had the double vaccination. There's about 20% who've had a single vaccination and very, very small numbers, literally a handful who've had a double vaccination. And for those, many of those have actually had very pronounced comorbidities. In other words, they've already got other conditions.
And yet there are reports that the government is willing to countenance a 2 to 4 week delay to make sure vaccines have reached the most vulnerable people. But businesses want more certainty than that. Andrew Lloyd Webber has promised to reopen his 7 London theatres in June, come hell or high water. And if that's not allowed, he says, come to the theatre and arrest us. But even less dramatic theatre bosses are dreading another delay.
It would be really depressing and really frustrating because we are all pinning our hopes on bringing audiences back, and everything we've been told by our audiences and the ticket sales we have for our next production tells us that audiences want to come back too.
Jabs, but what the Prime Minister has to decide on Monday is whether enough of the more vulnerable people in society have managed to get both 2 jabs and have had enough time for those to take effect before he takes the brakes off completely. And that's what ministers are still wrestling with.
Carl at Westminster, thank you. The Old Bailey heard distressing allegations today of how a teenager murdered 2 sisters as part of a pact with the devil to try to win the lottery. The bodies of Bieber Henry, who had been celebrating her birthday, and her sister Nicole Smallman were found with multiple stab wounds under a hedge in a park. Daniel Hussein, who was 19, denies murdering them. Sejal Carrier was in court.
Mina Smallman came to court braced for distressing details of what happened to her daughters last summer. The jury was told they were stabbed multiple times in a park. Bieber Henry 8 times, Nicole Smallman 28 times, after celebrating Bieber's birthday with friends in a COVID-safe way. attacked the court heard after their guests left and they had stayed on to continue the celebrations. Here, pictured that night dancing with fairy lights. Their bodies, the prosecution said, were found at Friant Country Park in Wembley the next day by friends who'd become concerned when they failed to return home. They were intertwined and concealed in a hedgerow. The attack on them savage as it was devastating, the prosecution said. This is the man accused of their murder, 19-year-old Daniel Hussein, sitting in the dock today just feet away from their mother. The prosecution allege he murdered her daughters after seeking a deal with the devil. The jury was told the teenager stabbed the sisters to death because a demon told him he would win the lottery if he sacrificed women. They heard that police found a handwritten note signed in blood in his bedroom, purporting to be an agreement between him and the demon. In it, he allegedly wrote his intention to sacrifice 6 women every 6 months in exchange for winning the Mega Millions super jackpot. Prosecution barrister Oliver Glasgow QC told the court in the park that night he went to lie in wait for potential victims, and when he had the opportunity to attack 2 lone and vulnerable women, he did not hesitate. The jury heard Mr. Hussein's DNA was at the scene, on the bodies of the victims and on a blood-stained knife found nearby. Mina Smallman left court after hearing difficult details of how her daughters were killed. Daniel Hussein denies murdering them. Sejal Karia, ITV News at the Old Bailey.
The EU sounded tonight as if it was threatening Britain with a trade war after talks over Northern Ireland broke down without agreement. The European Commission spokesman said the EU had not ruled out what he called cross-retaliation unless the UK abides by the protocol it signed up to. Britain wants to delay imposing checks on some goods, including sausages going into Northern Ireland. More from our political correspondent, Romilly Weeks.
Connecting Europe boasts the ferries in and out of Belfast, but the UK's relations with Europe are still facing a big disconnect. And Northern Ireland is the battleground once again, with the rhetoric heating up over sausages. There were no bangers on the menu at the UK-EU talks today, as they tried and failed to come up with a compromise that would allow chilled meats to be imported into Northern Ireland from next month, alongside plenty of other problems.
The protocol is being implemented in a way which is causing disruption in Northern Ireland, and we had some pretty frank and honest discussions about that situation today. There weren't any breakthroughs, there aren't any breakdowns either, and we're going to carry on talking.
So what's going wrong? It's all about what's known as the Northern Ireland Protocol. After Brexit, both the EU and UK agreed the need to avoid checks on the Irish border. But that meant Northern Ireland had to continue to follow EU rules on food standards, moving checks on goods crossing the Irish Sea instead. Without some compromise, sausages and other chilled meats will not be allowed from GB to Northern Ireland from next month. Checks on other supermarket goods, medicines and even pets arriving in Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK are also proving problematic. The EU is threatening cross-retaliation, i.e. a trade war could be next if the UK continues to refuse to implement the checks it signed up to in the Brexit agreement.
Our patience really is wearing very thin, and therefore we have to assess all options we have at our disposal. I was talking about the legal action, I was talking about the arbitration, and of course I'm talking about the cross-retaliation.
The standoff is having real consequences in Northern Ireland, renewed political instability and an impact on business and consumers.
And we're really talking about the worst case scenario of having cost rises and having availability issues, that we won't be able to keep the same things on the shelves as there are now.
Into all this flies the US president today. He's already made it clear protecting the peace in Northern Ireland is a priority. A tricky time for the UK, who won't want problems with neighbours to spoil G7 talks with old friends. Romilly Weeks, ITV News.
Well, our political correspondent Libby Vina is in Cornwall tonight, where the G7 meeting will be taking place. Libby, lots on the agenda for the next few days, but has the EU row overshadowed things somewhat?
Yes, well, this is a landmark summit, the first time since the start of the pandemic that leaders of the Western world have met in person. And the Prime Minister, of course, would like to focus on issues such as vaccinating the rest of the world by the end of next year, planning for future pandemics and climate change. But unfortunately, it does look as though the summit will be overshadowed because it doesn't seem at the moment that we're getting very good at getting on with our nearest neighbours. Three of the key players in the G7, of course, are France, Germany and Italy. And add to that we have a new president in the White House, President Biden, who looks like he might be a much more interventionist president. I think the Prime Minister will have his work cut out if this meeting isn't to end up being dubbed the Sausage Summit.
All right, Livy, thank you. Well, the government's been told it behaved unlawfully in giving a contract to a firm run by friends of Boris Johnson's then chief adviser. More than £500,000 of taxpayers' money went to the market research firm Public First, whose bosses knew Dominic Cummings. The judge criticised what she called the failure to consider any other research agency. The Cabinet Office says the judgment made clear there was no suggestion of actual bias. Two of the UK's biggest airlines, British Airways and Ryanair, are under investigation tonight over customers who were prevented by COVID restrictions from boarding flights that were operating. The competition watchdog says it's looking into whether the firms broke consumer law by not offering refunds. More from our consumer editor, Chris Choi.
Heathrow today, with summer hardly off to a flying start, and now refund policies of two big airlines are under investigation. Last year's COVID travel restrictions meant Yvonne McLeod couldn't go to the Canaries with Ryanair, but because the flight was not cancelled, she didn't get a refund or even a voucher.
I feel like I've paid for a service and then just told I'm having nothing back, so I do feel disappointed.
Ryanair says it approached refund claims like Yvonne's on a case-by-case basis and paid where justified. The airline offered to rebook flights to alternative dates if people couldn't travel due to lockdown restrictions. BA offered rebooking or vouchers. But today the competition watchdog said, "We believe these people should have been offered their money back." Last year, as now, Brits were kept from the beaches due to COVID restrictions, and campaigners say customers should not be financially penalised for following government travel bans. Do you recognise that the law is unclear on this issue?
Take this to court. That is the only place that this can be decided, whether it's a breach of consumer law or not. And what I would say about rebooking and vouchers is the new dates are very often very much more expensive for customers. They can't afford that.
BA insists it acted lawfully and has flexible bookings. It says government is punishing an industry on its knees. The customer I spoke to booked for Thailand. Her BA flight went, but she couldn't due to the travel ban last March.
We weren't given an option. At the time that they emailed us, we were told only that a voucher was available. We assumed that the pandemic would pass in a few months and that we'd probably be able to redeem those vouchers before the end of the year. And that's not what's happened.
A clear ruling on consumer refund rights is urgently needed because this summer more disruption seems likely. Chris Choi, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, we hear from the family of the twin sisters who fought off a crocodile in Mexico, and the 16-year-old waiter whose quick thinking saved a child's life. Those stories and more after the break. Welcome back. A British woman who was attacked and bitten by a crocodile while swimming in a lagoon in Mexico has tonight developed sepsis while in a coma in hospital. The family of Melissa Laurie told ITV News how her twin, Georgia, who was swimming with her, succeeded in dragging her sister out of the water by punching the crocodile in the face. Martha Fairley reports.
Twins Georgia and Melissa had been in Mexico since March, doing what they love, travelling, volunteering and working with animals. On Monday, they went with a tour guide to swim in this lagoon near Puerto Escondido, where a crocodile dragged Melissa underwater. Her sister Georgia, a qualified diver, saw what was happening and swam to her rescue.
And she knew that she had to kind of swim with Melissa and pull her back towards the shore or a boat or something like that. But I think the crocodile interfering with that just meant that she started to hit it. I think she must have heard somewhere that was a good course of action to take, and luckily for us she didn't stop until it let go, but it seems like it came back a few times, and yeah, she was very brave. We're all really, really proud of her.
The twins' older sister has spoken to Georgia, who's now been discharged from hospital, but Melissa's in a medically induced coma and has developed sepsis from her wounds. Her family are hopeful she's going to recover.
They have had to repair her stomach and sort of organs like that, so it's going to be a little while before she's able to eat and ingest food. So it's, yeah, we're weeks away at best probably, but we'll have to see. She's just as strong as the other one, cut from the same cloth.
Crocodile attacks are not uncommon in Mexico, although most are not fatal. But taking on one of these vicious predators is an astounding act of bravery.
Yeah, starting a fight and punching someone is not really my sister's style, but clearly if you're a crocodile the rules don't apply.
And Georgia's quick thinking may well have saved her sister's life. Martha Fairley, ITV News, Hampshire.
Other news now, in what is another blow to the high street. The clothing store Gap has announced the likely closure of 19 of its stores in the UK and Ireland. The shops will close when their lease ends next month. The company hasn't yet given details on the locations or how many staff could be affected. And the 6 Premier League clubs involved in attempts to form a European Super League have been fined a total of £22 million. They've been told they face further fines and a points deduction if they try again to break away. Well, football's European Championships, held over from last year because of COVID, finally get underway tomorrow. The games are being played at stadiums across Europe to mark the tournament's 60th birthday. One of the home nations, Wales, begin their campaign on Saturday against Switzerland in Azerbaijan, from where Lucy Watson reports.
Azerbaijan is the edge of Europe, 3,000 miles from Cardiff and half a world away from Wales. This is where Western Asia and Eastern Europe collide. It is now preparing to hold Euro 2020 and it is playing host to the Wales squad. It's a squad that Chris Mepham never imagined he'd be part of. He'd almost given up on a career in football to become a gardener.
I 100% was at that stage where I was looking at other routes that I can go down. And then, yeah, to be here 7-8 years later, about to represent Wales in a major tournament is, yeah, like I said, it's amazing.
The scenes of 5 years ago when the Red Army revelled and their team reached the semi-finals could be repeated, but it's a tough ask. Wales kick off their campaign against Switzerland on Saturday, before facing Turkey 4 days later. But their biggest challenge will be against Italy in Rome on the 20th of June.
The Dragon spirit of 2016 is ever present and the big guns are all here and fit to perform. But it's the youth this time around who are keen to make their mark.
They're ready to go. They're probably sick of us, harping on about 2016 as well. So they're looking to, to make their own history.
One day, these 12-year-olds dream of representing their nation too. So having international players visiting is inspirational.
It feels great that we have European champions in Azerbaijan.
I'm very excited to see famous players from other countries, and that's
This is a city with lofty ambitions, yet humble charms, where strategy, tactics and luck win out. The perfect home for Wales. Lucy Watson, ITV News, Baku.
And we'll be reporting from Scotland's camp tomorrow. In the meantime, there is a complete guide to the Euros on our website. And finally, Jack Smithson is just 16 years old and was only on his second day in his first ever job when a life or death emergency suddenly erupted at the cafe where he works. With the little girl choking on a piece of food, Jack stayed calm amid the panic and used his first aid training to save her. And today, the pair were reunited. Stacey Foster met them both.
It was only Jack Smithson's second day in his job as a waiter, but he had no idea that he'd be required to do more than just serve food and drink to the customers. Scarlett and her grandmother Angie were at this table last week when Jack saved her life.
We just got our food and I started eating my breakfast, and we were sat here in these chairs, and then I started choking on a piece of bacon.
Jack used first aid skills he learned as a sea cadet to help.
All of a sudden I heard the screams from Scarlett's grandmother, so I grabbed Scarlett and started using the Heimlich manoeuvre. You have to interlock your fingers like this and then wrap it round the person who's choking and basically just push in and up.
Luckily, it was a success, and thanks to Jack, Scarlett was able to carry on celebrating her 9th birthday with her nana.
I'd just like to say, Jack, you're an absolute hero, and I'll always be grateful to you for everything that you did that day.
I was really glad that he was there and thankful that he did that to me, and everything like that. It was just really good that he did that.
There's no words that can really describe it, if I'm being honest. It's just extremely happy and proud to have saved her life.
Unsurprisingly, Jack was named Employee of the Month for his heroics.
Hi, are you ready to order?
And he's still not done with saving lives. He wants to go to college in September to study medical science. Stacey Foster, ITV News, Doncaster.
Employee of the Year, surely. That's it. Tom will be here with news at 10, but from me and all the evening news team, bye-bye.